All right, I think we can go ahead and kick off our admission process declassified webinar here for the evening. To start, before we even kick off with introductions, we want to mention that closed captioning is available. You'll notice that there's an option to be able to select show captions if you should decide to use it. We will also have this webinar recorded and posted on our website for later viewing if you're ever interested in taking a look at it. We also have a number of admission staff members in the background. If you'd like to ask any questions throughout the process of us going through the admission read and review process, you're welcome to use the Q&A functionality, and our admission staff members should assist us here and be able to answer some of those questions in the background. We will also have a number of other polls going on throughout the webinar that you're welcome to take advantage of and enjoy. But with all of that said, we will go ahead and kick off with introductions. My name is Michael Plord. I'm one of the admission counselors here with Holy Cross.
I'm Lynn Varecchia, the Director of Admission. So glad you're all here tonight. And we
Absolutely.
also have behind the scenes a few of our colleagues who will be answering your questions. So keep them coming.
Absolutely. And so the point of tonight's webinar is to actually show you quite literally the admission process. And we say declassified, but what we really mean is to show you the behind the scenes viewing, so to speak, of what an admission counselor sees when an application comes through. So with everything that we have in front of us, application, recommendation letters, transcripts, and all other pieces of information, what is it that we're looking at? And what are some of the factors that really play into this admission committee read and review process? So particularly for those of you that are rising seniors and getting started, of course, with your own application processes, or certainly getting started to think about your own application processes, we hope this is helpful, again, just for you to see what are some of the factors that we really focus on and pay quite a bit of attention to as part of our admission decision read and review processes. So with all of that said, and in the interest of time, we're really just going to jump right in here. And so we'll kick it off first with just what you're looking at right now. So this is actually our admissions reading technology. This is what we use when we pull up an application in order to, again, go through the read process. And you can see not only, of course, what we're actually looking at here on the main screen, which is the high school transcript, the school report we'll talk a little bit about in just one second. But on the left-hand side, you can also see all of the tabs. And that is essentially everything that a student's application can consist of, and in a variety of ways. So some students will send certainly transcripts, recommendation letters. Others will add more, whether it's through interviews and demonstrated interest and HC responses you can see here, which we'll again clarify and talk about in a second. So you'll obviously see these tabs vary from student to student, but this is really at our fingertips. So as we pick up, so to speak, pull up an application, we get a chance to be able to go through these individual tabs again and really get a sense of not only what an applicant looks like on a computer screen, but hopefully get a better sense of who the person is that is actually applying to Holy Cross, not only academically, but also from a community fit standpoint. And so with all of that said, again, we'll jump right here into the details of what we are looking at. So you can see here that we do have the high school transcript tab up and open here. And the first page that we always receive is this school report. And so this is really just the summary of the school that we're looking at. Just about every single high school will fill this out as part of the Common App application submission process. And will give us some of these quick details of not only school name, as you can see here, but size of the graduating class, some demographic information that's broken down of that particular institution. But also you'll notice, of course, individual information for the student themselves. So their GPA, the scale that it's on, whether it's weighted, unweighted, highest grade at certain times, highest GPA in this particular class, giving us some context as to, again, where this sort of GPA falls within this student's class. So it gives us kind of a quick snapshot of not only, again, what the student is all about, but also, of course, what the high school itself is all about. Lynn, I'll let you take over here looking at the transcript itself.
So, there's our poll question responses. So the majority of folks guessed that, or voted that it would depend how long it takes to read an application, and they would be correct. I would say we typically can read about 4 applications per hour. And that might average out to about 15 minutes or so per application. But sometimes you get one that will go real quick, and you'll get ones that will take much, much longer. And will take as long as it takes to read it right. So here's the transcript. This is a nice clean one. If they only all look like this, or we could probably read a lot quicker. But they don't, most of them don't look like this. And we are really adept at understanding unique transcripts. This is a school profile. A lot of students don't know that the school profile is something that exists. So this is a document that your school counseling office will have available. It's typically on their website, and they do submit it generally with each application. And this is really a key to providing context for your school. So we really do our best to travel extensively during the fall and spring to get to know schools, to visit them in person, meet with your counselors, meet with you. But even if we don't know your school particularly well on a personal level, this school profile really gives us all of the insight that we need to understand your school. Many students feel that, we might not understand that there's a different grading scale or a different philosophy or different course levels. And this is the place that we really rely on, the item that we really rely on to help us understand that context.
Absolutely. And it should be noted as well that the school profile is generally a publicly available document. If you ever wanted to see your own high school's profile, you can generally go to your guidance counseling office or your college counseling office, depending, of course, how your school classifies it, and just simply ask them for a copy of their school profile. And it's usually a PDF that they can email on over to you, or it might be on your school's website. There are some schools who will actually just post it publicly for you to download and take a look at any time. So in case you're ever curious as to what your high school profile actually looks like, again, you have access to that information, but it is immensely helpful for us, certainly as admission counselors, again, to get that context of each individual school. So moving on down the line here of our tabs, we're running next into our recommendation tab. For Holy Cross, we do require a minimum of 2 recommendations. We need one from a college or a guidance counselor and a second from a teacher. Those students can actually submit as many recommendation letters as they want to, within reason at least. We certainly generally like to see maybe 2 to 4 recommendation letters is usually a pretty good number. If students do want to send additional, they are welcome to. But you can see here, again, we just get the quick snapshot information of the recommender, how they actually know the student, and then, of course, the recommendation letter itself. This is such a key, I think, piece for us to, again, understand the context of who, once again, the person is that's applying to Holy Cross, as opposed to simply just looking at what the numbers have to say about them, what the GPA and the transcripts have to say about them. Oftentimes, recommendation letters can provide us with some interesting insight. Maybe not this particular recommendation letter, but regardless, they can provide us with some interesting insight into who the student is, what their abilities are, of course, as a classroom. And oftentimes they reinforce what are really some of the things we infer about a student by reading those transcripts in full detail. So we get a chance to really understand, again, through the numbers, through the grades, through the course selection, and all of the detail of the transcript, a little bit about what we feel the student's capabilities are. And then recommendation letters oftentimes, again, really provide that reinforcement and let us know that, yeah, this really is the type of student that we're looking at. So we really appreciate getting this context in a lot of ways, again, as to an insight, I should say, into the person that is actually applying to Holy Cross.
You don't read Latin, Mike?
I don't. That one's beyond me, despite our classics program. It's also important to note that, again, recommendation letters can come from anybody who knows you well. So I mentioned we do require those minimum 2, but students can submit as many as they would like to. Interestingly enough, we do ask for parent guardian recommendation letters. And so this is certainly something that you're looking at right here, one of our parent recommendation letters. And we should note, of course, this is, as you can see, first year example applicant. So this is all, of course, fabricated information, but regardless, this is always a really interesting piece, I think, for us to take a look at. And I think, Lynn, as a parent yourself, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the parent recommendation, guardian recommendation letter.
Yeah, well, I think that, lots of these letters start with a line saying, well, you know that I'm biased. And we expect that, right? So it's not a matter of will it be a positive or a negative recommendation letter. And that's true for most of the recommendation letters we receive. We expect that they will be positive if the student has made a good choice in terms of who is writing those letters. It's really just about what we can learn about the student. So parents, guardians, people who live with the student or have grown up, been with them since they were young, just have a different insight. Sometimes these letters are long, sometimes they're really short. And some of those little anecdotes that we can get, we hear a lot about messy rooms and relationships with siblings and hopes and dreams and all those things. So it's a nice opportunity for a family member who's really proud to share something about the student. We recognize that it's something that every student can do for a variety of reasons. We welcome this letter from parents, guardians, or anyone else who is in the student's life who wishes to support them. And if this additional letter is not in the file, It is not a black mark against the student. There's no negative. It's just meant to be additive and help us know the student a little bit better. And if it's not there, it's no problem. I'll also note that we are happy to accept these letters in any and all languages. So if you have a parent, guardian, other person who wishes to support you, and English is not their most comfortable written language, we're happy to receive these letters in other languages as well.
They come with the best stories, though. I will also note, parent, guardian, Rex, if you do happen to write one for your students, I encourage you to read them as well. You'll probably have more fun reading them than we do, but I will admit we have an awful lot of fun reading them. So the other aspect that is important to Holy Cross in the admission process and the review process is understanding the context of how a student has gotten to know Holy Cross in their college search process. So this can be, of course, done through a variety of ways. Students can get to know the college through virtual webinar programs like this one, through tours of campus, whether virtual or in person. But we also really strongly recommend interviews as part of our admission read and review process. Interviews give us a chance to sit down and talk with the student and really understand through a conversation, once again, the person that's applying to this college, as opposed to, as we mentioned already, the applicant on the computer screen. So this really humanizes the application process in a lot of different ways. And it is one of the reasons why, once again, we strongly recommend interviews as part of our admission process. But when a student completes an interview, we do have a write-up of that conversation by the interviewer. So in this case, one of our admission counselors here provided us with a quick little interview write-up that gets added to the application file. And once again, provides us with that context, that character context of who this student is, what they're looking for as part of their admission process, how they've gotten to know Holy Cross in their search, some of the things that they're excited about academically, from an extracurricular standpoint, and it lets us understand how this student can really contribute not only to the academic and classroom world of Holy Cross, but also how they can contribute, to the community that they're going to be a part of. As we are really an overwhelmingly residential campus, our students often spend quite a bit of time, not only again learning, but also really enjoying again the experience of living on campus and being a part of everything else that's going on around them. So interviews again answer that question in a lot of different ways for us. I should also note, interviews are very easy to do. No one's going to ask you what kind of animal you could be, if you could be any animal, anything along those lines.
They are also offered both in person on campus as well as virtually. Many of our interviews happen via Zoom, which makes it extra convenient.
Absolutely.
You want me to talk about the Holy Cross response, Mike?
I was just going to suggest, absolutely.
So this is an optional response that students will find in the portal after they submit their application. So you don't need to be looking for this on the Common App or the Coalition application. You'll see this in the portal after you submit the application. This is not meant to be a sneaky, hidden, supplemental essay. You'll see here that the responses to these questions are very short in this case, and that's completely fine. The two questions that we're asking are, in what ways have you been able to learn about Holy Cross? And that question is really aimed at helping us understand how a student has learned about us, perhaps in ways that are not always visible to us. So the fact that you've logged onto this webinar, we will know that. You registered through our system and you click the link and we'll know that you did that. If you come to campus and take a tour or talk to us at a college fair or high school visit and fill out the card or sign up on the iPad, we'll see that. But there are so many ways that students learn about colleges and about Holy Cross these days that are not visible to us. And we would love to hear about those things. So that could include that you came to campus at a time when our office was not open. You walked around, you took a self-guided tour. Maybe you came to the women's lacrosse game that weekend on campus. Maybe you talk to your neighbor who every time they see you, they want to talk to you about Holy Cross because they loved it so much. Or a teacher, in this case, for a student, their teacher has been telling them about Holy Cross. Maybe you've just been looking around on our website. You really appreciated the viewbook that we sent to you in the mail. You've been doing website research elsewhere. It's wonderful for us to have a sense of how students maybe have come to learn about Holy Cross and maybe how they've identified us as a fit. The second question is if there's any additional information you wish to share, this is a place to do so. Many students take the time in this area to just add that one thing that came up after they already hit submit on their application. We used to get lots of emails from students who say, I applied yesterday and then today I found out I'm going to make National Honor Society. So this is a great place to collect any new information that has come in or just anything else that you want to share. This form itself is optional and both questions are optional. So you can submit the form and answer one or both of the questions or not submit it at all. So it's an opportunity for you to just share any additional information we may not see elsewhere in the application. We like
For
reading.
sure.
There was a lot of fun to read.
And I think it is important to note, it was mentioned, this really isn't a supplemental essay. It can be something that, as you can see, is as quick as a couple of paragraphs, and just something that really can provide a lot of context, especially again in this modern college search that so many students are going through now at this point. The other tab that you'll notice here, this is called student correspondence. And so we do track emails that students will send to us throughout their college search process, whether it's just a quick question, whether it's a thank you note after an interview, really anything that students want to send along. These are all, again, points of demonstrated interest that we appreciate seeing because it shows us that a student is willing to really not only take the time to learn about Holy Cross, but send that email and again, ask those more pointed and specific questions at times. So we always, again, really like to see these points of contact that may not necessarily be picked up again through a campus tour or some of the more formal events that students might sign up for. So just know that, again, any of those emails that you send, any of those ways that you really get in contact with an admission staff member, those are also things that we pay, again, quite a bit of attention to in terms of, again, understanding the idea of fit from a demonstrated interest standpoint.
I think it's also worth noting, that you'll see that this is all collected here within, it's not collected within the application, but it's viewed within the application context. So when a student sends that email saying, I need to drop this class, or I had a scheduling conflict, or something came up, or there's an explanation for a grade that was maybe unexpected, or anything like that, that may factor into our decision or just be relevant information, we will see it. We will respond to that email when we receive it, but it will also live here in your record. So as application readers, we will still have access to that information. So if you feel that there's anything additional that's important that we know, emailing us is always the best way to do it. Some older folks in your life may tell you that sending a handwritten note is the way to go. You can do that if you want to. We're just going to scan it into our system and view it electronically anyway. So I personally prefer electronic communication. I think the fact that it does exist here and is viewable within your application is a good reminder to just maintain a very low level of formality. So we don't need it to always say to whom it may concern. But I think just a little bit of formality. So it's not written as though you sort of texted it to your friend. It does not need to be perfect. You don't need to spend lots of time crafting, long emails to us, but know that it will exist within the context of your application.
All right, and the next tab that we have here is the formal contact. So you can see here that our first year example applicant is actually here tonight, apparently, at our admission process declassified webinar. But we also keep track of, again, other points of contact, whether it's in-person information sessions or virtual programs, July advisory seminars, worth certainly mentioning that those are coming up here this upcoming July. Those are in-person visits where students can actually not only take a tour of campus as well as do an information session, but they also have a chance to do an essay writing and interviewing skills workshop. So if students did want to get a little bit of insight from an admission staff member about what to expect as part of those two processes, you certainly can join the July advisory seminars and sign up right on our website. But regardless, again, these are all of these points of contact. Anytime you fill out a form, anytime you sign up for something, it's once again tracked as part of our process. And once again, I apologize for the dog in the background.
So last but certainly not least, we haven't even seen the application yet, which might be a surprise to some of you viewing that we actually view a whole lot of items before we get to the actual application. It is still a very important part of the work that we're doing here. So this is a common app from last year. So it may look slightly different in the coming year as they often make small changes. But this is sort of I know that you can see sort of a PDF view of the application yourself before you submit, but this is how it looks to us right here on our screen. So we have basic bio demo info about students, family information that you choose to share, a summary of your coursework for senior year, any honors and awards that you've received, any test scores that you opt to self-report. We do accept self-reported test scores. In this case, the student is only reporting AP exams, but we sometimes will see SAT or ACT scores here as well. Now is when we sort of really get into the real meat of the application. In my opinion, would you agree, Mike?
Yes, for sure. I mean, extracurricular involvement, as you can see here, is always immensely helpful for us to see in terms of understanding not only how a student really spends their time outside of the classroom, what they dedicate time to, but also gives us some insight into maybe some leadership roles that students have been able to hold, whether that is formal leadership roles. As you can see down there in the third one, the student happens to be vice president and external liaison of the Pre-Med Society Club. But it also is a chance, as you can see with some of these descriptions that are added, a chance for students to tell us maybe about some of those informal points of leadership that students might hold in various clubs and organizations. So you can provide this quick little, again, blurb about what it is that the club is all about, which we always encourage doing, particularly for those clubs that we may not be as familiar with. Lynn, for instance, mentioned National Honor Society. We're certainly familiar with an organization like that. Key Club or Interact are very popular national organizations, but there are certainly times where students are part of something that's unique to their high school. So it's a chance, again, for you to give us some context as to what that is and how, again, you've really been able to be a part of it. Again, in either formal or informal leadership ways. So really great, again, to see how a student is a part of various aspects of their community. And once again, gives us some insight into how that can carry forward into the Holy Cross community, once again, outside of the classroom. I should also note that there's no golden ticket when it comes to clubs or organizations that our students are part of. There's no one organization that's going to stand out over any other when we're reviewing these. But we really just like to see, again, how a student spends their time. How are they contributing to their community? And the other thing that's important to note with this extracurricular page is that it doesn't simply need to be the clubs and organizations that are within your high school. You can tell us about some of the things you're a part of outside of your high school experience. Maybe it's something in your local community. You can see here the student has put down family responsibilities. The student has put down that they're a church service volunteer, part-time jobs that students might be a part of, mentorship or leadership programs that are going on outside of the classroom, travel sports or club sports. Like these are the type of things, again, that you get a chance to share with us as part of the extracurricular page. Oftentimes this really, I think, suffices for a lot of students. This gives us the pretty good picture of all the things they've been a part of, though some students might find it more valuable to send along a separate resume. And you certainly can do that if you would like to. There are options to either email or upload a resume as part of your own, as part of your application process to Holy Cross. And if you choose to do so, of course, we'll add that to the application file and also include it. But oftentimes, again, this extracurricular page on either the Common App or the Coalition application, whichever one you might choose to use, is going to be, again, really, I think, a really nice overview of what a student has been a part of over their time as a student in high school.
Well said, Mike. I'll just point out here a nice nod to our plug for spell check or proofreading. This is a staff favorite. The student is part of the anti-bullying club, but we really liked that they told us they were part of the ant-bullying club, and that is ripped from the headlines, real life situation. So do a little proofreading. Do we have some more Latin?
A little more Latin here. So this, of course, would be where you're going to put your traditional college essay, Common App essay, Coalition application essay. This is where we get a chance to actually look at it. And, Lynn mentioned this idea of sort of the meat of the application. This, I think for me, and I think for a lot of counselors, is my favorite part of the application. It is the part that is far and away the most unique for every single student. We get, you never know what you're walking into when you pull up a college essay. You never know what story that a student is going to share with you, but it really gives us that insight into the person that you are once again. And so I always encourage students, when you're thinking about, what am I going to write for my college essay? One of the best questions I think you can ask yourself is, how can I share some aspect of who I am that wouldn't otherwise have been seen by just, reading your transcripts, reading your extracurricular page, looking at those recommendation letters. So really sharing, again, some insight into who you are as a person, something that's important to your personality, something that you're passionate about, that you're excited about. Those are great topics when it comes to the idea of a college essay. And really, as long as you're writing about something that's important to you, the topic itself isn't going to be, again, sort of the be all end all, so to speak. Like, we don't need this amazing story for us to want to read your essay. You don't need to have been on a ship that sank and you were the person who single-handedly sailed all the children to safety. It doesn't need to be that type of story. oftentimes, I think the most impactful essays that we read are ones that are what we call small moment essays. They're kind of just about the everyday, maybe the mundane or seemingly mundane to you. But for us, again, these stories often, again, give us the best insight into who you are as a person. So always have a lot of fun with college essays.
And I think this goes without saying, but this is placeholder text, so please do not submit your essay in Latin. The Common App, as well as the Coalition application, are continuing to provide an opportunity for students to speak about disruptions, in part related to the pandemic, but it can be anything. So if there is something that has impacted your ability to learn, to prosper, to, whatever it might be, it can be health, it can be financial, it can be circumstantial, family related. There is opportunity for you to share that information here in the application. Sometimes we find that this is a better place for that information than in the essay, though it's entirely up to you what you want the focus of your essay to be. But just know you have a space here to share that information. Please do not feel the need to put something here if you don't have something. You don't need to fill every space. In terms of education progression, that would be if you took some time off from school, if you were taking a gap year, if you transferred high schools, there's a chance to provide a brief explanation just to kind of fill in any questions that we might have about that. Here's the final.
Absolutely. And we have our last page here on the application itself, of course, the Holy Cross member page. So generally when you fill out the Common Application, Coalition application, this is one application that you can fill out and submit to multiple schools. So generally those first, 9 pages that we just looked at are going to be pretty standard for any school that is accepting the Common App or the Coalition application. Then those schools will ask for their own member page. So this is going to be specific to each college or university that you're actually submitting your application to through the Common App or the Coalition application. Our member page is relatively brief, I think. It's nothing too overwhelming in terms of what we're asking of students. There are other schools that may add a little bit more to their member page, so it certainly is important to pay attention to everything that they're asking you to fill out. But for us, it's largely going to be just things that are really specific to Holy Cross. So you can see here, of course, when a student is looking to actually apply, the admission process that they're applying through, in this case, a regular decision, non-binding application process, testing, you can see here, and this is a great chance, I think, to talk a little bit about something that might be missing for some families. On the tabs that we're looking at over here to the left, this student actually said no to testing. Holy Cross is a test optional institution, and if they say no, you'll notice on all those tabs over there on the left-hand side that there is no testing tab. So we just simply don't see it. And quite frankly, I don't think we really notice anymore at this point whether or not testing is there. We saw 65, am I getting the number correct? 65% of our applicant pool applying test optional this past year. So there are many students who are taking advantage, of course, of the test optional policy. And as you can see here with an application read and review process, we have a lot of other information that we can prioritize and pay a lot of attention to, again, in terms of determining the idea of the admission decision. So at least from Holy Cross's perspective, the idea of test optional should be a stress-free decision. Again, just some other basic information down here. Academic interest, we do ask, though it's important to note that it doesn't affect how we read and review your application. We read through what I affectionately call a major blind review process. In other words, what you're interested in, whether it's a specific academic area or you're completely undecided and not sure of what you want to do, it doesn't change the standards that we apply to our read and review process. But we still will ask, and just for really curiosity's sake and data collecting sake, what students might be interested in. But once again, just know that this doesn't change how we review your application. And so when it's all said and done, as we're going through all of these tabs, each counselor is not only, of course, inputting all of this information into a reader form, as we call it, but they're also marking down their notes. And so they're essentially providing us with a summary of the application in a variety of different ways. So some of this is pre-populated. You can see up there at the top, this box is just our demographic information of the particular student. The contact box, you can see right over there, that's actually the same information that you saw earlier in the contact tab that we pulled up. Just gives us a quick summary snapshot of the ways that our students have interacted with us throughout their college search process. We have some high school information. So as we read and review the actual high school transcript, we're sort of summarizing the factors of the transcript that are most important to us. And so just to give some clarity as to what some of these columns are, I suppose you can say, because you'll notice that there aren't column headers within the box itself below the GPA. We're actually looking at 9, 10, 11, 12. So those are, of course, the 4 years of high school that a student has taken. The 6 number there is the number of core academic courses a student has taken each year. So core academic courses for us are going to be pretty standard, probably what you would expect. Natural science courses, humanities courses, language courses, history, social science courses. I'm probably missing a couple others in there, but generally, again, those academic core courses, that's what we're counting within that 6 number. You can see we're also paying attention to the program that a student has taken advantage of from freshman year moving right on down. And we get the idea of program, again, through the high school profile that we pulled up earlier. So that provides us with the context of what is a higher level class at this particular high school. Is it advanced? Is it AP? Is it IB? Is it accelerated? Is it honors? Is it high honors? Is there no leveling available for this particular school? And so we obviously can keep track if there are levels of courses that students are taking advantage of within that 3rd column. But you'll also notice to the right-hand side over there, we have the program details. Just below it, it says offered. And so that gives us the quick summary snapshot of how many higher level classes are actually being offered at this particular school. And also if there's some nuance to that sort of higher level curriculum that's available. In this case, you can see 26 AP classes total are offered, but there's also an advanced math curriculum. MV Calc is multivariable calculus, so they're calling that a higher level class as well. And then there's a Latin prose class that students can take advantage of that is considered an advanced course. So that's where we get that context of, again, what these advanced classes are that students have taken. And then, of course, the grades themselves. So that's what we're looking at to get a little bit of a sense of not only, of course, how students have performed within the classes themselves, but also understanding how a student has really, I think, developed and grown into themselves academically. I often mention this to juniors and seniors. When they think back on themselves as a freshman, they're often thinking of a different person in a lot of ways. High school is a time of maturation, whether it's academically, certainly, and that can be represented through the high school transcript as well. So we can sort of see these trends develop by looking again at this quick snapshot summary of what the transcript is all about. Lynn, I'll have you jump in on the notes section below.
So just as we wrap up our last few minutes here, what you're seeing at the bottom, on the bottom half of the screen here, are the reader notes. So this is what would result after, so the first reader on the left, the second reader on the right, both readers have seen the same materials and are both taking the time to write a summary of each item that they've reviewed. So I was the first reader in this case, and I pulled out a quick sentence or two from the counselor recommendation, the teacher recommendation, some thoughts from the interview. I listed some information about the students' extracurricular commitments, wrote down both the topic of the essay and also my thoughts about the essay, and then mentioned something that the student had written in the community disruption field there that we talked about before. And then my colleague Kirsten did the same thing. So hers is a little bit shorter. She would have reviewed everything in the file, and as a second reader, it's not necessary to duplicate what the first reader has done, but she would have added in this case, the parent or guardian recommendation, which likely came in after the first read was done, that Holy Cross response, and also shared her own thoughts on the essay. We both also provided what we call a bottom line. So it's sort of what's our takeaway. It's not meant to be the final, the only word on the student, but it's sort of as a reader with some insight, having reviewed the whole application, what are we sort of walking away feeling? So this snapshot right here is what the admission committee would see. And this is the start of our conversation. So we get a really good snapshot of the academic, extracurricular, and personal experiences of the student. And this is the jumping off point for the questions to start. So we very often as a group will start to click through these tabs again. We may want to double check something on the transcript or look at that essay that the readers really, really liked, or something that they felt was of concern somewhere in the application. You'll notice some of these tabs are highlighted in green. So that will happen when something new has come in. So it's brought to our attention that maybe the readers didn't see that particular item when they did their review. So it's in a lot of ways, the committee process is a live in the moment third read that happens in a group setting where we still have access to all these materials. So we certainly rely on our readers to give us a good summary, but then have access to the source material, can go right to that item ourselves and review it. And we vote, and we have lots of great conversations about students. And And we enjoy it. We really enjoy reading applications. I'm going to share the results of the last of the poll that we have. I know that I sort of gave away the answer in some ways when I said maybe it takes about 15 minutes to read an application. Some of you may have underestimated just how long some of our days can be. But we generally will read 30 to 40 applications a day in our first read period. With second reads, because it's more of a double check and looking at new information, we can usually do more in that 40 to sometimes even 50 or 60 range on some really busy days. So I don't see any. I think our behind the scenes colleagues did a wonderful job answering your questions as they came in. Thank you so much for your questions. We are here to continue to answer your wonderful questions, and we hope to have the opportunity to read many of your applications in this upcoming year or the following year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should also know, obviously, we are showing you Holy Cross's read and review process. This will vary from school to school. Every college and university will have a little bit of a difference in terms of how they read and review applications. So it certainly is important to know what schools are looking for. I'm seeing a question here, particularly about calculus and physics and specific course requirements. Obviously, again, that's going to vary from school to school and generally can be found either on a college or university's website, or if you're unable to find it, we always encourage you to reach out, of course, to admission staff members, whether it's, of course, Holy Cross admission staff members, but generally admission counselors and admission officers at colleges and universities are always happy to help answer any questions or provide any clarity, again, to the nuance of their particular process. But I should also note that one of the goals of our process, as Lynn mentioned, not only do we have the two readers who provide the summary of the application and their own sort of opinions within those bottom lines, but we also have that full committee voting process to actually make a decision. The goal of that for us is in as many ways as possible to try to remove bias from this process. We are humans, and anytime humans are doing any type of a process, they're going to bring their own implicit and unconscious biases into these read, review, and decision processes. And so when we have that sort of second reader at times to check the first reader, or when we're in those committee conversations, the amount of times that you hear an opinion that you just didn't consider before, or sometimes you get challenged, right? Sometimes you have a thought of what you're thinking about a particular applicant, and somebody sort of pushes back against you and says something that you just hadn't really thought about before. It allows us as admission counselors to hopefully be, we hope anyway, better readers. And again, once again, trying to really level the playing field for all students who are applying to the college. So we do have a little bit of time for questions. So I've got one that's popping up here. Does applying ED1 versus ED2 make a difference in applying to the college? We should note for Holy Cross application processes, there are only two application processes. There's early decision and regular decision. Early decision is your binding agreement. Regular decision is your non-binding agreement. And we do offer two deadline dates within early decision, so ED1 and ED2. The only difference is timing for those two processes. So applying ED1 or ED2 won't change how we view your application. It will simply change when you submit your application and when you hear back from us. So just to give some clarity to that, November 15th is your ED1 application deadline. Students hear back from us by the middle of December. For ED2, it's a January 15th application deadline. Students hear back from us by the middle of February. And then for regular decision, it's a January 15th application deadline. Students hear back from us by the middle of March. But of course, all of these dates and deadlines are on our website. Right. And we should also note, there's a great question here about college level statistic courses. Again, we pulled up here a particular example of one school, right, showing advanced classes and AP level classes. But once again, when it comes to this idea of higher level courses, they can be designated in a lot of different ways. Dual enrollment classes are also something we pay quite a bit of attention to, and those can be offered in a variety of ways from different high schools. Generally, if you're taking it through your high school, it will already be noted on your transcript. You can also, of course, check with your guidance office or your college counseling office as to how they denote any type of dual enrollment classes that a school might be offering. But if it is taken separately through a community college or a local college, you can actually have those transcripts sent over to us from the registrar's office at that particular institution. So they can typically send those directly to Holy Cross, and we will, of course, include those in the read and review process as well. There's a question here about, is it better to apply with a specific major? Once again, just want to clarify, major blind review process for Holy Cross. All of our freshmen actually start out as undecided. So applying to the college, whether again, you have an academic interest in mind or whether you're completely undecided, does not change how we view your application as part of our read and review process. Once again, that can vary from school to school. So important to note how schools might consider students who are either applying into specific majors or schools or programs. But once again, with Holy Cross, it doesn't affect how we read your application. It's a question about ED1. If you're not admitted ED1, are you automatically put into the ED2 pool? Generally, for our decisions, we should note they're usually going to be really kind of three different types of decisions. Admit, waitlist, and deny are the most common that we're going to put out there. With early decision, though, we tend to really stick with a final decision, whether that's admit or deny. Defer is possible. So defer is when we take an application from early decision and roll it into the regular decision round. So we look at you once again with any new information, but that is a rarely used decision for us, to be quite honest. We often find when it comes to early decision, that final decision, either admit or deny, is actually more beneficial to the student. And it can, of course, at times be hard to see that, especially when it comes to the idea of a denied decision. But with an early decision process, having that sort of chance just to be able to say, you know, that's a final decision for me. You can move on to your next schools that you might be looking at. We found that to be more beneficial for students. But again, defer is possible. Admit, waitlist, and deny are more common. Again, waitlist, I should say, is really a decision that we use only in regular decision. And then, of course, again, admit and deny are going to be both processes. Right.
All right, I think that's it for the questions I see at the moment. I know we're answering one more via the chat. But thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you'll continue to tune in to future webinars.